What we'll talk about today is how you create a high performance AI team. So one of the very important parts here is to emphasize it's not just about people. Many of these experience come from my background now, recently having worked 3 years for H&M, where I was a part of building up the AI team from zero to approximately 150 employees in less than 2 years. Going from zero models in production with AI that the business had nothing to do with in the beginning to having tens, 15, 20, hundreds of models after 3 years. But also a bit from my experience working internationally with companies like Vodafone Group in the UK with over 500 million customers globally. Working early with the Nordea Bank, having the opportunity to work in depth with different types of tools and technologies. So today, I want to go through part of this story that I did at H&M most recently and some of the major learnings. And remember, it's not just about people. So I left H&M recently, and what I do today is I help companies with actually implement AI into their organizations. I don't do much hands-on, even though I love the technology and the code, but I build teams. I help companies to build teams, and I help them accelerate the usage of AI into their different companies. I call it the AI-driven transformation. And the AI-driven transformation, it's all about changing the company to be able to work with technologies. We all hear about the digital natives out there. We all heard about Klarna, Spotify, all the Silicon Valley startups, and how are they able to drive major impact so fast with technologies? Having less people than some of the more established companies. How do you work faster? How do you work smarter, not just harder? And that is what I advise companies on today. How do you drive real value from proof of concepts early on into production? And then how do you change the entire company? That's the AI-driven transformation, focus on value and team building. So before we get started and deep diving into how you create these high-performance teams, it's always important to define why we are talking about this. Why aren't we just hiring people the old Tayloristic type of way, where you have a band where people go in and they assemble things? Why don't we just see it as an assembly line anymore? Because that's relatively easy to teach those type of skills. Why and what are we doing right here and right now? I think taking a step backwards, and why do I emphasize so much on AI and data these days? I have a major technology passion, but it's not just technology for the sake of technology any longer. So I talk about AI so much these days because it's becoming more and more everyday for companies. There's studies now saying that 80% of companies approaching AI and to some extent data, they fail to implement it. But at the same time, we're seeing these digital natives driving massive amount of insights and competitive edge towards the customers. So traditional companies are lagging behind a little bit. So AI is not just a competitive edge these days. If all the digital natives are doing it, if a majority of the large-scale organizations are implementing it here and there, we should start seeing it as a hygiene factor. And part of seeing it as a hygiene factor is also understanding on how you leverage it, not just the algorithms, not just the technology, but everything around it. I think that if you're not AI first in the future, you will struggle to survive. So it is a necessity for companies to start adopting to data-driven practices, building teams that know how to deliver great technology products that are customer-centric, utilizing AI. Otherwise, they will be lagging so much behind, so they will be the new Kodak of the future. And I like to think, a lot of these things all goes back to change itself. There's a very good saying that when the rate of change of the outside is larger than the rate of change of the inside of your company, the end is near. And I think Kent Beck, that's one of the founders then of programming or extreme programming. And what he explains is that the problem isn't change, because change is inevitable. Everything is going to change. The only constant is change. The big thing here is, do you have the ability to cope with change when it comes? And in order to build a high performance team, you need to build a team that not just delivers on a given task that you potentially as a hiring manager are giving them, but how do you give the team a flexibility to be proactive? How do you make sure that when the unexpected happens, that something breaks, that they have the mandate and the flexibility to solve the problem without asking for permission? High performance is delivering above and beyond the expected. If we are doing the Tayloristic approach when we're building teams, what we really are doing is defining a task and expecting and measuring against that task. What we need to define instead is the clear objectives of the team that we're building, and then the key results that we want to measure them on. That's a complete fundamental difference in how we look at performance. Performance is not just competing on the arena and see who can jump the furthest and the highest. It's about innovation, it's about flexibility, and it's about going beyond. It's about inventing a new sport. So, what are the major challenges in organizations today, especially around AI? What we see when we're building teams is that there is a major resource constraint in the market right now. You want to hire the best and talented. I don't know how many companies I've spoken to, tens, dozens, hundreds of companies that all say, I want to hire, or we want to hire the most talented individuals. And we wanted to come here. We're going to get people from all of our competitors and we're going to build high performance teams. Well, that's not just happening because the talent pool is so small. And we're only looking locally in most companies when it's a global talent pool today. There's a lot of waste and duplication of the things that we do. There's a lot of technical debt that's being built into systems. If you want to build a high performance teams, you need to take that into account as well. If you're giving them a monolithic system to fix and you're saying, fix it, how high performance do you think it's going to be? There's a long time to market in developing these type of solutions as well. There's a lack of engineering standardization, especially in the newer fields like AI and data science. What's standardization there when the field is just being invented? There's an inefficient process of new innovations. So if you're working with a talented team and they say, oh, we need new things to work on, the process of getting those new things is relatively limited in most companies as well. And then as well, when they build something, the technical part is done, then the user adaptation. You're creating a product towards end customers. You're not getting it out there. You're not doing the right marketing. And you're doing some internal product as well. You're not getting it out there. You're not doing the right rollout. Is that then the generative of the team's performance? Or is that something that you haven't really accounted for? Adaptation is key to success. You can invent and build the greatest product ever, but if nobody uses it, you're not getting any value. There's not well-established best practices either, especially not in AI and data yet on how to do these things. And then in general, when it comes to data and AI teams, there's low data literacy, which also then goes to the slow rollout time. People don't trust the processes. People don't trust the predictions. People don't trust the numbers. So it's important to make sure that all of these things are addressed when you're building high-performance teams. And if you thought that this presentation was going to be, how do I write the best job ad to attract the talent, then you're wrong. This is about how do I create the right environment to even start attracting the best talent, regardless if it's freelancers or full-time employees or partners. Everybody wants to work with the best, and talent attracts talent. And these times require new solutions to old problems. How do I get the best, and how do I create the best prerequisites to deliver for my organization? And what we see in many organizations today is that you get talent in. You might offer them really good market salaries and you give them great promises. And then they end up in organizations. And this is true for most organizations that's been around for a while, where the planning cycles are quite long. The organizations is quite siloed. You might get a data scientist or an engineer working over here and there, but they don't talk to each other. Deliveries are very narrow and focus on that silo. And still in many companies, waterfall approach is the standard. Some companies are now getting more and more comfortable with agile, but they're not there. They're not product organizations that creates the right prerequisites for talent. There's a lot of different legacies in the organizations with many monolithic systems, and there's a lot of managers. Escalating certain topics takes forever. These are not the right prerequisites. You can get the talent through the door, but you will never get them to stay unless you actually start addressing these topics as well. Remember, high performance isn't just about hiring a talented individual or two talented individuals. It's about prerequisites and trusting them as adults to deliver on the objectives and the key results that you want them to deliver upon. It's not telling them what to do, it is telling them what to achieve. And then, of course, the clear definition. And I've scoured the internet when I set up teams to see what is a high performance team and what are the characteristics of those teams. Remember, it's not about individuals. If you've seen the movie Moneyball, I think it's super good and it really talks about hiring or getting T-shaped individuals. Moneyball is about not getting the all-star player that ticks all the boxes, but getting those that are very good in one field and then complementary skills on a relatively shallow level in some, so you get a T type of individual. Putting these individuals together and giving them a sense of purpose, they're accomplishing something bigger than just a paycheck, will have clear correlations with the high performance teams. Ensuring there's open communication in the team. You don't want to hire talented individuals that are poor team players. You want to hire the individuals that have great performance and can create great trust and communicate. I once interviewed a person. He came to the interview. We sat down and I asked a question. I actually think it was my colleague from H&M. We were sitting down and she asked, how have you prepared for this interview? By the way, that's not a question I usually ask, but we got a very interesting answer. The answer was, I do not need to prepare. I have a PhD. I do not need to prepare. I have a PhD. I don't care if you have a PhD from MIT and you're the most brilliant scientist in the world. If you don't create a good setting for the organization, for your team to discuss and share and have knowledge together, then you're out. In the beginning, when I was building teams, I got so excited when I got these applications. MIT, Harvard, all the things you see in the American movies, the top Ivy League universities. And I was like, this person really wants to work in this team. I hired them and they were talented jerks. They killed the mood of the team and they thought that they were rock stars. I don't want to hire a rock star. I want to put together the greatest band that ever played this earth. And you don't do that by having people that are poor team players and then don't create the right prerequisites to deliver. There needs to be trust and mutual respect in the team. So in H&M, what we spent a lot of time on in the beginning was to get people offsite. Even when we were only 10 people, we got offsite and we were building trust. We were sharing and we were coaching and we took feedback sessions over and over again so we could build a clear trust. And trying to keep that when we were 150 people as well. And also what we didn't want to do was create leadership that was expert leadership. Even though I come from an expert background, I had to take a step backwards and say, hey, I don't have all the answers, even though I did. And I'm also super humble. Let me just tell you that. It was really about making sure that people in the teams had the mandate to take decisions. So when they came to me and said, can I do this? I just replied back, I don't know, can you? Because they needed to take a full operational responsibility. My role as a leader was always to talk more about what I wanted them to accomplish and coach them to get there, not give them the answers, because then I would be a centralized bottleneck for all these things. Making sure that these working procedures where managers are not taking decisions, but rather putting context was in place. Making sure we had differences in the teams, diversity and inclusion. We had over 30 nationalities in our team after a year. But diversity is nothing without inclusion. So it was important to make sure that these differences we had in the teams had the opportunity to speak and they had the opportunity to listen to other people as well. And making sure that these high performance teams had clear flexibility and adaptability. We don't work 9 to 5 when you're working with knowledge. There's research saying that you're up to 10 times as productive when you have the flexibility and adaptability in your teams. I mean, I solve most of my problems when I'm taking a shower and I finally have an opportunity to stand still and think about something. Then everything pops up into my mind. How can you measure knowledge in a linear setup? Doesn't that create the wrong setup? We want to have solutions to problems. And then, of course, fostering a culture of continuous learning. So these are the characteristics of a high-performance teams. And in order to get a high-performance team, it's also important to give them the right runway. What is the problem that you're solving? If I take a high-performance team and I say, go out and save the business, I haven't identified what problem they even need to start with. It's not always about the people. As a leader, you need to set the right context. As they say in the No Rules book that's describing the Netflix culture, lead by context, not by decisions. Leaders should not take decisions. They should set a strategy and explain why their strategy is there so that the teams can deliver. That's how you have a high talent density and create high performance teams. So it's important as a leader to define do what. That's not what you want to do. That's what you want to do, not do how. So leaders give the direction in the form of what goals to achieve. Remember, the OKR, what gets measured gets done. And it's up to the teams to start breaking that down into the how. Because the teams need to decide for themselves how to achieve the goals. If you're hiring very talented individuals, if you are so good so you're able to attract them to your organization, why should you tell them how to solve the problem? That's Tayloristic methods, and they're not standing in front of a big assembly line. They're solving very creative problems. That's how you create high-performance teams. So creating a high-performance team is not just about hiring the best individuals, screening them the right way, giving them the hardest test, and having make sure that they fit into the team. It's equal as much as you, as a leader, assembling that team. And then, of course, when it comes to AI, and this goes to any given product in my mind, make sure you're actually having them solve the right thing. If you're building AI-driven products, this is something that's a joint effort. It's not just about one or two talented data scientists. This is an example workflow from my perspective that shows that this is an equal team effort to identify and actually be pragmatic enough to say, no, we don't think that this is an AI product. Having a flexibility that we want to see the results. So bring in the subject matter experts, bring in the data scientists, bring in the engineers, bring in the product owners, assess it on ways to add value, see if it can be automated, look at the limitations of such a product. Can you program this explicitly, develop a machine learning product, further assess the viability? So this is super important. And I've added this because I like to talk about solving the right problem. Saying no, being realistic, focusing on value creates the right prerequisites for your team of being productive. Saying we need to do a high performance AI team because we want to do AI because it's part of our company strategy, that might be the wrong statement to make. The right statement is rather, what products should we do? Remember, there are no AI products. There are only solutions to business problems. So your teams are solving your business problems. Don't force AI upon them. Be a part of the early iterations of identifying which problem you're actually trying to solve. Remember, identifying which problem you're trying to solve is more important than the solution you're building to solve a problem, because you might be working on the wrong problem. So rather iterate the problem statement and what you want to do before jumping into saying we can solve it with AI. Because I can guarantee you there will be no such thing as a high performance AI team if they're not solving an AI problem. And another part, and I'm taking you way off chart here, but another part is also, what problem are we solving with AI? Because you might say, oh, this is an AI problem, but what is this team supposed to do? Are they doing business optimization, which majority of the companies are without actually knowing it? You are only optimizing, turning up the volume on your radio to max. Forecasting, super example. Every company are doing some sort of forecasting. Every company can most likely improve their forecasting utilizing AI, but you can never be over maximum. In order for you to be over maximum, you need to start looking on innovation. First, you can innovate within your processes, then you can disrupt the market by doing business model innovation. Some companies actually don't see the difference, but seeing the difference makes all the characteristic of a high performance team, because solving the right problem in the right context is most important for teams. It's even more important than hiring the right individuals. The wrong individuals or non-talented individuals might create more value than talented individuals if they're working on the right problem. So that's a clear statement. And also, it's easy to convince executives of business optimization, and it's very, very hard to do it in business model optimization because it's going to eat your current setup. And then how you organize around these things is equally important. So creating a high-performance team, it's all about the prerequisites. It's all about the environment. And sometimes teams seem to think that we need to work agile, we need to do startup kind of mode. No, the way you organize the teams needs to be adopted to the problems that they're working on as well. So for instance, if you're working in banking and finance, you're getting, oh, we need to stop financial crime. You know the problem because it's stated in law. And you know the solution. Oh, we need to do sanction screening. We need to do KYC. We need to do looking on deviations, etc. Norms dictated, laws dictated. You know exactly what you're doing. The same thing if you're building a bridge. You know exactly how that bridge is going to look like after the architect has done it. You can plan for it. But if you know the problem, but you don't know the solution. So for instance, customer-facing type of product, what do they need to have? What do we want them to have, etc. These type of things, you don't know what they want. You can have a guess, which is a hypothesis, but you don't know the solution. And then, of course, the transformative part, which is very equal to business model innovation. You don't know the problem, and you don't know the solution. Now, why did I take this up? Because all of these things have different parts that you can work on. So if you're getting a high-performance AI team that's going to do a specific model, and you know exactly how the solution is going to look like, it's regression. So take IFRS, for instance, in banking. That's a model to determine credit for banks. It's mandated in law. You're probably going to have a data scientist or somebody working on that problem. Now, why do they need to work agile? If you're putting them in an agile team, yes, you're going to have iterations and scrums, but you could equally have waterfall approaches because you know exactly what you're going to get out. In order for them to be high performance, the way you organize and deliver is also important. And then when you want agile and scrum type of setup is when you don't know the obvious solution. And that's for transformative approach. You're getting a high performance AI team saying, you need to start innovate. We need to utilize the latest technology. We need to reinvent the market. Well, then you need to have more of a discovery-based approach around lean startup. How do I access value? How do I pivot, etc. So the way you work is equally important to working as well on the right problem. And as you can see, all of these things slowly start getting the pieces together and creating a high-performance team. And I'm going to talk a bit about the team and how you retain them as well. So don't worry about that. But remember that if you are hiring talented individuals, and it all comes back to that, you want to build a team. It is an incremental approach as well. I've seen so many companies hire good individuals, super smart, PhDs or masters or very much experience. They've done everything right. And then they take these individuals, which is potentially the first hires of their AI team or deep learning team or whatever it's going to be. They put them there and say, go. And what do you think they'll do? They're going to start searching for data. They're going to start searching for all of these prerequisites that we've talked about. But they don't find it. They don't get the right tools, the right solutions, and they start playing around. And then 6 to 12 months in, they resign. That's a retention problem. And that's a risk. The average retention rate is 1.5 to 2 years for data scientists. In some companies, it's even less. Google, Amazon, they're all over 3 years when it comes to retention rates. It's because they give them the right problems to work on. They give them the right environment. And by the way, they have data. So they have collected it and they've stored it. They have it in reliable pipelines. They have access to it. They have explorations. They've done all the groundwork. So the order you start hiring people is equally important as well to create a high-performance team. And when you work, it's not just about that. It's also about having clear roles and responsibilities, a career path. In the beginning, the first type of hires, they need to be people that might not need that. They need to be a certain type of individuals. When I was one of the first into H&M and setting it up, there was no career path. There were no clear role descriptions. And I liked that. But then the next couple of people, they started bugging me about it all the time. Oh, what's my career progression? What can I do? I did a smart thing, if I can say it myself. I twisted it around and I said, I'm not going to tell you where you can go. Tell me where you want to go, and I help you get there instead. That was to save me a bit of time. But as you start progressing, the first type of mindset that you want to screen for needs to be aligned as well with what you have in place. So when you're building things up, don't just think that the first individuals that are there are going to solve it. It needs to be people that might be a little bit more entrepreneurial. They need to have the right method. We already talked about that. Right tooling. I don't think Team's going to cut it for high performance team anymore. Probably need to have Slack or something like that. And then the workspaces, especially in these COVID times. How do you interact with your colleagues? How do you make sure you check in on them? And how do you make sure that you can measure performance, etc.? All of these things are super important to make sure people stay long in the companies. Remember, it takes time to get talented individuals in. You can mitigate that by taking consultant, but that's not potentially the long-term solution. To build the teams, you need to have a clear strategy around how you're going to manage your internal workforce. And when you're working as well from a high performance type of setup, you need to ensure that you work with feedback. Feedback is true both for product deliverables, so you don't get something in the end that you didn't want, but rather that you work in iterations. Both from a people management perspective, if people get feedback, you can help them with adjusting the performance to become a more high performance. Don't wait until you have the yearly 360s. This needs to be an increment that if you see poor performance, it needs to happen immediately. The same thing goes. They're delivering products. You're not seeing anything in the first, the second, the fourth sprint, but then you need to start seeing so you can provide feedback. Feedback is the only way to course direct. And the people that can't accept feedback, they will never be in a high performance team, because high performance team, they help each other. So getting a feedback culture in and being clear on the performance that you wish to see, it's super hard to give, and it's even harder to accept. But when you establish that culture, the team will run super fast. And I think this is a key picture for creating a high performance team as well. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here before we start moving towards the final home stretch of this presentation. The roles of different use cases, creating a high performance team. It's all about having a good leader. It doesn't need to be a technical leader. It needs to be a product owner or a use case lead that has done this before, that knows how to get the team into shape and get them to where they want to be. And I think what's super important with this as well is that the roles of a use case, of a high performance use case, will vary over time. The composition of people in there, you will have a small core of people, most likely the leader, and then potentially a core engineer, data scientist, as you can see in this pilot use case. But things will happen over time. There will be different needs. And you can't hire all the time a full-time employee to have potentially a part-time role or a temporary role, depending on the size of your company. So it's important that you have a talent strategy. And what we did at H&M was that we set up what we call a consultancy model, which was basically having all the talent on the side, having use cases as delivery organization, and then having resource management in between. So teams could go up and down. In the beginning, when they were starting out, they needed a certain type of role. When they were scaling up, we needed to ensure that we captured all the needs of the use cases. We prioritized accordingly. And then we also worked with consultants from time to time to mitigate high-level workloads, getting specialists, and we work with partners to have complementary setups in the team. Just building of internal resources, in our mind, was a slow way of scaling. It created, of course, core competences within the company, but given that talent has changed in the market, given that they put so much requirements towards organization, it was super hard to just have full-time employees, because the best that we wanted in certain situations, we couldn't employ them, but we could work with them. So we found creative solutions to scale up and create these high performance teams as well. So roles varies over time, and people will go in and go out. Long-term assignments will make sure that people will leave. Some of the most talented individuals, and some of the mistakes I've done, is that I had talented individuals working on a use case for 2.5 years. And then they come and resign and said, and I asked them, why are you resigning? And they said, well, I want to do something else. Okay, but if I have offered you another use case, would you have taken that? Yeah, but now I've already resigned. So sometimes people gonna have the need for developing, and you can give that opportunity by just moving them around. focusing on the short-term delivery and not seeing the long-term perspective is super, super bad. You need to make sure that you keep the talent within the company. And they're saying that people will have 3 careers in their life, and if they're good, we want them to be in the same company, right? So make sure that you look at the individual, sometimes even above the individual use case, to make sure that you get the knowledge in the company. And we can't talk about high performance without talking about technology, because you can hire the most talented individuals in the world, but if you don't get the technology right, you're going to do it wrong anyway. And I think what I want to emphasize when it comes to technology is people process technology. And this is super modern research. It comes from the 60s. And it's all about people defining the process that use technology to support the people. When people do technology for the sake of technology, when somebody comes to you and talk about AI and data and say, I'm doing the latest research, I'm doing deep learning, I'm doing guns, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, then you should be a little bit worried. Because you should never talk about technology in the first place. You should talk about the people and the process, because they utilize technology. Technology is a major enabler, but it should never be the main purpose. A tool or a fool with a tool is still a fool. So make sure you understand that the people you're hiring, they're not just out there to play with shiny diamonds or look at the latest research. You are building a business, and you're improving a business to make sure that you have the right tools to do that. And of course, this goes without saying, making sure you do best practices. Don't buy platforms and then get users to do use cases. Look at ecosystems. Make sure you adopt technology best practices, or your architects cater for that. Remember, I don't care if I work with the best technology. As long as the technology that I'm working with, I can change it in the future. Buying what's best today is a recipe to fail in the future, because what's best today is not going to be what's best in the future, because some of these companies are super good today, but you should be worried and you should plan for migrating off already when you're signing the deal. Having loosely coupled architectures, making sure you have serverless, automated, stateless type of applications is one of these prerequisites. Handling technical debt upfront so that the team don't need to be bothered later on. Being high performance is not just about creating great results. It's about cleaning in front of your own door as well, making sure you don't leave all the documentation to the next team. It's super easy to do a model, 2 to 3 weeks, show a PowerPoint and say, look how easy it is. Then reality hits you, and you have to do proper documentation, proper integration, proper management of all of these type of technologies. So plan for it. So concluding then, and coming towards the end, going from, you remember the first picture, into more customer impact. And customer can be both internal and externals, where the focus of your high performance team is always high value outcomes, business value. Going from the siloed IT type of organizations, or it goes for the entire organization, to cross-functional teams, because remember, high performance is not just about having deliveries here and there, it's about having this cross-functionality. Waterfall approach, mixing that up with more agile, iterative development. Remember, defining the problem first is the key for high performance. Making sure you have data or an ecosystem of technologies that you use, especially when it comes to data. Going from many managers to many doers, increasing talent density. Talent attracts talent, but if you get talent, you need to treat them as adults and push decision-making down to them. And then, of course, build value, not structure. In the beginning, it's the focus on delivery of the teams. Start with proving real value. Adopt the team to match delivery. It goes up and down. Remember, you start with one data scientist and an engineer, and then you build up the team around them, and then you mix them up, and then you move them out. Having the Moneyball approach. You're not just hiring individuals, you're building teams. Remember to match the team towards a delivery, making sure you go and find talent where nobody else has looked. It's a talent constraint on the market. Find partners, consultants, freelancers, full-time employees, give them part-time employment, make sure that they are attracted, and get them for what they're good at. And technology is the small part. algorithms, technology, transformation. Companies with good scaling practices in AI and team building spend half of their analytics budget on adaptation. You can build the greatest technology in the world and have the coolest algorithm generating tremendous amount of good insights. But if you're not getting people to use it, your team is not high performance. So match the team and the delivery mechanism after the prerequisites and what is needed. High performance is seeing the results and acting on them. So what we want to do is go from experience-based, leader-driven decision-making to data-driven decision-making at the front line. And when you have teams that are data-driven, they have data-driven decision-making, and they are taking the decisions, you're going to start seeing high performance. It's not just about getting resource A, B, and C that are top of the market, because A, B, and C might be people that don't pass the ball to each other. Building a team, getting them the opportunity to take decisions and run really fast, that's high performance. And then what's next after that? After that, we're going to start seeing more and more focus on building capabilities. So you have these teams, they're running super fast. Then what? Then you need to start training your organization, portfolio prioritization, exploration, ecosystems, platforms, expertise, risk and ethics, quality assurance, ways of working, and capturing and scaling. But these are a topic for other presentations. I'm not going to deep dive. I'm just giving you a bit of a taste for what's next when it comes to building these type of teams and scaling in your organization to make sure you have the right people and the right results. And there will be more focus on scaling things up. So the resources that's built what you have today is going to need to focus on reusability of technology, building data and models that others can use. You see this now in companies like Facebook. They create forecasting engines that's not just for one team, but the entire organization can use it. That's high performance. That's getting 10x of your investment, not just solving one problem, but by changing perspective, you solve hundreds of them. So that's a 10x factor. That's high performance. And the teams that start thinking in that way, those are the ones that you want to hire. And that comes to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening in, and I hope you got something out of it. So I can see that there are a lot of questions in the chat. Getting some here from Gosha. Hi, Errol, I wonder how you set up remote environment to make sure that the AI team is actually high performance. My question there is, or my reverse question is, the remote environments. I mean, if you set objectives and key results of your organization, basically you measure the teams towards the key results, and you as a leader shouldn't care so much if they work 40 hours per week, 100 hours per week. Well, you should probably coach them not to work 100 hours per week. But what's important is the key results and that the needle is moving in the right direction. If you set a clear objective and key results for your team, it is your responsibility as a leader to follow up on those things. And then, of course, there are hygiene factors that they need to have access to internet. They need to have access to the right tooling, etc. I think that's the most important part. So setting up the remote environment, for me, I always said to people working for me, regardless of what the company policy is, I don't care where you work from, as long as it's legal. You need to have the right tools in order to deliver on it. And then I'm going to measure you, and I'm going to follow up. And that's been the key. And then we have Andreas having a question. Do you start with having a high-level vision to break down into milestones to reach along the way, to be able to keep everyone motivated along the way? This is a super good question. And having high-level vision. So one example is, I take this example from Netflix. They had a super good example. When they were presenting the new company vision a few years back, the management in their QBR, the quarterly business review, went out and said, we are going to grow in international markets. They put the context. Then that was broken down into each product area. Okay, what does growing in markets look like for us? And the company, of course, had their own OKRs. So it was trickling down and aligning with the context for each individual team below that, so that the team on a product level, the lowest granular level, 8 to 12 people, could say, okay, we're going to set these OKRs and align them, so sort of milestones. And in each product increment, we're going to deliver these things. So each team actually are responsible for breaking it down on a lower level. It's not for management to say these are the exact things. They need to set the OKRs, which are the milestones, and these are the key results, which needs to be broken down per team level and aligned with the company strategy. And I think seeing the results is what's key. That's why when you're designing and building these teams, it used to be you have one specific focus and then you hand it over to somebody else. The most or the high performance organizations, they organize alongside the value chain. So they take it end to end. Take companies like Klarna, for instance. They organize around their teams responsible for checkout, pay later product. Their product starts when the customer press pay later, and it ends when they have paid. And they own the process in between, so they can follow it end to end. And I think this is key. Teams will be motivated when they see that something changed here gets a result here. That's motivation for me, at least. And then Andreas also have, how do you measure high performing? I think it's the same, Andreas. High performing, I come from a background in theoretical measure value, which is super theoretical. But measurement all boils down to definition. And then the definition needs to be of high performance. In me, high performance is defined as going above expected results. And then, of course, measure high performance should be, okay, how much do you go? So if you're a bad performer, then you're probably below agreed results. If you are a performer, you're probably aligned. And if you're a high performer, you're way and beyond. And there are different targets to measure that. And the research actually says in creative environments, high performers are 10 times more productive than low performers. So it's important to create these requisites, because if you hire one person and they're 10 times more productive than the next one, the same thing goes for engineering. I think there are research from the 80s that show great performance in engineering are like 50 times better than low performers. So measuring these things is, of course, important. Then we have another question from Gosha. I wonder how precisely do you check in the recruitment process that people are humble? Oh, that's super hard. Humble, I think humble might be the wrong definition. They need to be a fit for the team culture. Humble is, of course, a part of it. Inclusive and humble are two keywords. It's super hard. I think that what I usually do and what I usually say is humbleness and team fit goes to the feeling you get in your stomach when you're talking to people. I've had some really good people in my interviews. I've done over 300 hires the last 5 years, and I've done over 1,000 interviews. The best hires has been when I had a good gut feeling that everything checked the boxes, all the CVs, the technical screening, and then you have the right feelings, like this is going to be a good hire. The bad hires are usually the ones that have a great CV and they tick all the boxes, they do all the engineering and good, and then you have that feeling in your stomach that this doesn't feel right. It's not very scientific, but of course, then I've hired a few of those people and I always had problems with them. So I always trust my feeling. Do they say the things I want to say only because they think I want to hear them, or are they sincere? And that's hard to measure, and I think that comes with experience as well. You need to do quite many wrong hires before you become really good at it. If you haven't done too many hires, you usually set up checklists and try to measure it, but in the end, if you tick all the boxes, it boils down to your gut feeling. I usually say 10% of your final decision should be your gut feeling as well. Coming from sort of a measurement background that's not scientifically at all, but it's a good piece of advice that somebody gave me 10 years back, and it still holds. Then Gosha also have, what exactly do you position AI team in a development organization so such a team actually have the best possible environment to work in? Depends on the organization where we hire the teams. In the beginning, I think that these type of teams should be centrally, so you can build a community and capabilities. As the organization matures, then you can actually start handing them out into the business units. It needs to be ready. I was hired into Vodafone to lead the data science work for risk and profitability. I was set out in the organization without any prerequisites or environment. I failed miserably. It wasn't until they actually started moving me to the central capability where we were 5 people and I was not alone, that we started seeing progress. So it needs to be incubated until the organization is mature, and then you can start handing it out and create a data-driven organization. Andreas also have a good question. When do you think AI will steal our jobs? It will not steal our jobs. Humans are still so much better on creativity, seeing the big picture. I think what it all boils down to in the end is amplified intelligence. Amplified intelligence is all about having AI focus on the boring things. So we as humans can focus on the creative part of things. Automate what can be automated by utilizing AI and technology. The rest we humans can do. I know that I rather spend my days on doing fun stuff than filling out Excel sheets. And if I can get an AI to do that for me, well, then I'm all for it. Agatha have, how do you reach a synergy and build a real team of talented and smart people? Good question. I think that we need to reconsider the way we work with talent. Synergy is, of course, mixing and matching and seeing that the sum of 1 + 1 is larger than 2. So I think that creating the synergy is real about finding, how do I work with partners? How do I work with internal organization? And how do I make sure that we focus on value? I think the synergy comes when we start working smarter, not just harder. Measuring hours is a way of making sure people work more hours. But what we want to do is make sure people work smarter and produce more value. Then we have a question here from Peter. A common problem is company solving an AI problem using rule-based software. Huge amount is already invested in. How do I make them realize that there are better ways to accomplish results? A good analogy there is that we try to convince the H&M brand and the head of the H&M brand that we should do forecasting. She said bluntly, I can do better forecasting any day of the week. AI will never be better than me. And I think our answer was, no, we're pretty sure on that, but you're one person. And back to the AI stealing our jobs. What if we can get AI to do all the kind of boring rule-based type of performance, and we can get you out there and focus on the creative part? Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. We showed the results, and they started seeing that AI were actually better performing than getting interns and rule-based type of procedures. And now they call us and ask, or they call the AI department and ask, when can we do more AI? So I think seeing is believing when it comes to this investment. Seeing that the ROI actually will be good, and convincing the non-believers that AI is the way of turning it up to maximum when it comes to these rule-based type of setups. Then we have the final question, and we have 1 more minute. Experience-driven versus data-driven. Is an experience originating from data? Yes, but it can be from old data. It doesn't have a systematic approach to it. I actually wrote a thesis once that said we should focus on reading data and drive decisions into humans until it becomes a standardized procedure based on that the brain is learning to trust the data. Experience is originating from data, but it's originating from an unstatistical sample of the world. Utilizing data is actually applying scientific methods to it. Scientific method is just a methodology of deriving the best decision based on the available data. And that can always be overturned when more data approaches. So trusting data is more of a process. Experience is accumulating based on data points that are potentially biased and not statistical significant. I hope that didn't become too much of an statistical approach to experience. I think experience is super, but you need to combine experience with data-driven approaches, and you should always base a hypothesis on experience, and then you should test the hypothesis. And if it's wrong, then you should discard it, and if it's right, you should go with it. And I think that's almost at time. We have 1 more minute, and I understand that people will drop off for lunch now. It's been super good speaking about the topics that are very dear to my heart. Don't be afraid to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn or ping me. More than happy to discuss further on how to build high-performance team and what type of ads and job descriptions you need to build those. Thank you so much for listening in, and have a great rest of the week.